Really thrilled that Gareth and Niels are here with us tonight. This whole idea of placemaking, I think, is absolutely crucial to the idea of City Club. A lot of you will know that there have been many conversations with stakeholders, with local stakeholders, about what we could do to try and improve the public sphere on Midsummer Boulevard. There have been so many conversations around Midsummer Boulevard East, and we thought, well, what about thinking about some possibilities creatively and freely? And we're incredibly grateful to the Arts Council for funding Niels and Gareth to engage with Central Milton Keynes and with possibilities for making improvements to the public realm. And improvements to the public realm in order to create a kind of arena, an atmosphere, a piazza, an environment where people, a civic space, which is not for shopping, which is just for people to meet, to hang out, to have a coffee, watch a film, go and see a play, an exhibition, all of the original ambitions of the City Club. Gareth actually had an exhibition here in the gallery in 2011, some of you might remember it, and I think, if my memory serves me right, you described it as a retrospective of new work, filtered through my memories of my experiences of growing up in Milton Keynes in the 70s. Something like that. So it's great to have Gareth back working with us. Niels is an artist who works particularly, I think, between public art, architecture and urban planning, and with specific interests in utopia and playgrounds. And Niels is also a professor at the Royal Danish College of Art, I probably got the name wrong.
Academy of the Arts.
Yeah, sorry, Academy, the Royal Danish Academy of Arts in Copenhagen. So absolutely thrilled to have two artists of such calibre really engaging with Milton Keynes. And I think I probably said enough. Over to you.
You said a lot. Thank you, Anthony, for that introduction. Welcome to the City Club. About a year ago, we began having conversations with MK Gallery for an idea, a plan for how to animate the public spaces around the newly expanded Milton Keynes Gallery. And I'm delighted that a year later we've already got to the stage. I'd like to add to what Anthony said and thank the Arts Council England for funding quite a short research and development period. Some of you were here 3 months ago when we first did a presentation about this. It's good to see so many faces in the room tonight. And we're going to talk you through, I guess, our kind of working methodology that we've used for this project.
Do I prefer?
Oh, okay. I'll just stand like this. Maybe I should just project more. Can you hear me at the back? Good. Okay. I was told that this had a kind of pick me up. Anyway, it doesn't. Okay. But why don't we just go straight into talking a bit about what we want to do. One of the ways in which we began working was to look at the imagery of leisure and how defining leisure, creating images of leisure, is what often creates the leisure that happens in a space. Images like this. This isn't Berlin, it isn't Rio, it's Stevenage, the first of the post-war new towns, from the cover of Architectural Review in 1957. And this kind of idea of creating images of animated public spaces was something that we looked at from the start. Also, ideas like the Expo or the World's Fair. This is an image from the 1964-65 New York World's Fair. The idea of a kind of lunar landscape.
One of the things that we've been discussing together is this idea of cultural regeneration, but also modernism, and how modernism, there's a history of this kind of activity. This is the Delaware, this is where I grew up, Bexhill-on-Sea, and the Delaware was very central to that town, and it was built to create a kind of what Anthony was describing earlier as a cultural quarter on the seafront. And it's very, you see this a lot in different seaside towns where some kind of festival hall or civic building or gallery was used to become part of the centre of a city. And that's one of the things that we've been discussing quite a lot, a thread that runs through a lot of our thinking, which, and the brainstorming that we're doing that you see in the other room.
We also looked a lot at kind of, it's called early visionary projects. This is the Fun Palace by Cedric Price and Joe Middleton, which was a project from the early 60s which sort of launched a movement in leisure complexes, modern leisure complexes that look at contemporary art, theatre and public space and combine them into a whole.
And one of the things that links, say, the Delaware Pavilion to the Fun Palace is utopia, and this utopian impulse that runs through this kind of civic imagination.
The Fun Palace is often considered to be a forerunner of the Pompidou Centre in Paris, and the high-tech imagery of this scheme very much relates to the architectural language of Milton Keynes in the 1970s. It's something that we've looked at closely. And then moving on to more recent times to structures like the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao. This is the institution that lent its name to the term that we're using the most advanced contemporary culture to energize a city. The Guggenheim effect or the Bilbao effect, the Guggenheim effect.
But this building also, if you visited it, actually has a very good playground as part of its landscaping around it. And that's also something that we've been thinking about for this project.
This is, I believe, one of the first, if not the first, images of Milton Keynes when it was still Cooleyville, a local council project by Aylesbury Town Hall in the early 1960s. Of interest here might be, in terms of our project, the logo at the top of that tower, which went on to become the logo of the Milton Keynes Development Corporation. So the idea of creating animated public spaces was on the table right from the beginning with Milton Keynes. Later on, with the arrival of the Development Corporation, you have images like this of the city square, an early image showing that there would be kind of electronic notice boards and moving images, latest high-tech ways of advertising, passing on information. Sorry, okay. Do you want to go on to the next one? And Milton Keynes very quickly started to develop its own language of leisure, its own kind of imagery. This is the cover of AD magazine from 1975, depicting life for the new citizens as a game of snakes and ladders. Again, this kind of imagery has been very influential in our thinking. And of course, the famous sequence of drawings by Halbert Jacobi, which have come to define the look of Milton Keynes in the 1970s. The most complete record of a city that was both built and unbuilt. One of the things that we've considered around central Milton Keynes isn't the idea that it needs regenerating. Milton Keynes is a success story and always has been. It's the idea that it needs finishing. And also the ideas in the City Club kind of move in that direction, the idea of how to complete areas of the city that perhaps have never fully realised themselves. Milton Keynes has also, while developing all this imagery, there's been losses on the way. This is the adventure playground by Archie from the mid-1970s. This photo is in the mid-1970s. As with many of the kind of visionary architectural projects at that time, it's now been demolished. But I carry this building in my memory because I'm in this photo there, staring at it. Alongside the architecture and the design of the period, we've also looked at the popular culture of the time. Examples like this David Bowie album from 1973, Pin-Ups, which is an album of cover versions. And the idea of the cover version, of taking something that's been done before and remaking it in a new form, has been quite key to our thinking as well. The idea of appropriation, here he's appropriated Twiggy, as well as lots of 1960s songs. The Bieber Shop, a legendary store from the early 1970s, which managed to go bankrupt very quickly by making things like its own baked bean tin. The idea of what happens when you just go into phenomenal detail is how big do we need to look and how small do we need to look as well. This is a very typical Bieber image. I think Milton Keynes is a really glamorous idea, a really glamorous place. Bieber wasn't scared of glamour either. This image from the 1970s looked back to the 1920s, a distance of 50 years. We're now looking from today back to the early 1970s and the late 60s, a distance again nearly of 50 years. Time travel. So, having looked at all this imagery, we started to look at the space. And just for people who aren't so familiar with the site, this is the new gallery building here, as planned, in the middle, the theatre there, the lozenge here, Midsummer Boulevard, and the way to Campbell Park. And we started to just consider different aspects of the site by looking at different decades that Milton Keynes has experienced. This image looks to the 1960s and the idea of pop art and pop art. But each of these drawings I'm going to show you, which is from a document called Decades, has a real plan in it as well. Here we see an idea for flooring that draws on this space in Stockholm.
Called Sarah's Torre.
Which Nils pronounces so well.
This is an example of a very active and very successful public space. And you can see echoes of this in the images we showed you earlier of Milton Keynes. And it's not that dissimilar in certain respects.
This drawing represents the 1980s and draws on certain recurring motifs from Milton Keynes. The palm tree and the labyrinth, what would happen if Margaret Powell Square turned into a labyrinth? Or what would also happen if a new garden was built outside the cafe of the gallery? We looked at this image in relation to the following photo, which is a Piazza d'Italia in New Orleans, and the idea of this kind of postmodern excess of architecture as a kind of second serving for the senses, delivering too much, the absolute opposite of Milton Keynes in so many ways. But what can this sort of architecture tell us about the site? And finally, this was our kind of summary drawing where we drew certain conclusions around the idea of a new park, a new remodeled piazza, and a new playscape at the back of the building that would give on to the learning space of the new gallery. We kind of theorised the site in two parts. If this part here, this area here is modernism, this part up here is postmodernism. This part really respects the original plan of Milton Keynes. This part above looks at how you might do something different.
One of the things that we found, and also that Gareth already knew about, is the infrastructure pack, which is this amazing document that was made by the original planners as a kind of, how would you call it, a kind of catalogue of the designs for Milton Keynes that would be easily exported to Europe for other city planners to maybe make their own Milton Keynes.
This is an image from the proposal that we eventually made, the City Club proposal, which looks at certain key elements of the design of central Milton Keynes. The paving grid, the porte cochere, the famous bench by Brian Milne, and the globe light. Our respect for these features underlines the whole City Club and our approach to it, in that rather than wanting to remove all this, we want to enhance it and see how it can be developed for city life in the 21st century. This is a very poor quality image of a drawing that we did of how these ideas might be reapplied to Margaret Powell. The gallery was built at a time when I think respect for these ideas was at something of a low, and so the original Milton Keynes infrastructure was removed from the site. How might we reintroduce it? Put the globe lamp back into the square, run the paving grid between the theatre and the gallery. But in the spirit of fun of postmodernism, maybe we might have lamps at different heights in the playscape, a kind of surrealist touch.
One of the things that we want to make clear is that this is not an exercise in nostalgia. We want to actually, as Gareth mentioned before, we want to reanimate these design aspects of this amazing utopian vision of the original Milton Keynes design and bring them back to life in some way.
And here we consider how the porte cochere, the famous structure that helps guide you across the roads in central Milton Keynes, could be fed through two different images of Milton Keynes, the high-tech image in the middle, and perhaps the more, let's think of it as a pastoral or pergola type image at the bottom, to take Milton Keynes archetypes from the 70s and 80s and apply them to this structure, and then apply them to the site. A porte cochere. Here's a page, well, a fake page from the infrastructure pack. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, the infrastructure pack is a box And in that box are loose sheets of card, and on each card is a design like this, so of a bench, of a dustbin, of a lamppost, and of different signage, and so on, telling you in very simple terms the size, the materials that they're made of, and so on, what font you have to use. So it's a very simple communication tool, design tool. And so we've been looking very closely at this box instruction pack and look at how we can take these original designs and tweak them slightly and just bring them up to date, maybe.
Well, here we imagine that the sign for MK Gallery has become the standard street sign that you see all across the city, connecting the gallery effectively to every street in the town. Do you want to talk about this? This is an early plan that we've come up with for Margaret Powell Square. Something I should really say at this point is that these plans are all offers at the moment. They're ideas. They're the result of a 3-month period of brainstorming. So we're showing you possibilities. This is like an index of possibilities. It's not something that is in any sense decided or going to happen at this point. It's the result of our research.
And I think that's something that should be very clear. Hopefully we will try and make as clear as possible that these ideas are suggestive. They are, it's kind of a brainstorm. And what we hope to do is develop some kind of loose structure from which then we take this further and engage through a period of consultation. So this is just really this very early playful moment to try and create a foundation from which then to connect and to consult with people.
So imagine if we move the name of the gallery onto this signpost here. What's going to go on the gallery instead? Well, why not revive a logo from the late 70s and early 80s? The logo that took Milton Keynes into the 80s. 6A had this idea of putting a porte cochere outside the building, but they were going to paint it white. Why don't we make it a classic porte cochere? This could also be a lighting scheme for the site. I don't know what you all think, but when I leave the theatre, I always feel like I'm walking onto a football pitch. What if we made the lighting of the square actually a much more intimate idea? So the globe lamp here, the lights from the porte cochere here. I suppose we added another light as well, the neon heart of Centre Keynes, as depicted on the front cover of AD magazine in 1974. You can see it in the room there. We don't have an image of it here. Many people enter this square from here. They park their car in the theatre and they walk around. How about being greeted by a giant heart? You might have noticed that the paving grid ran right up, not to the front door of the gallery, but to the window that will cast a kind of view right through the gallery in 6A's new plan. I've also been involved with the building project as a design advisor. When architects get their hands on a gallery, you have to be very careful to have an artist involved, because the architects and artists often want to do different things to spaces. One idea that I contributed to the scheme was this idea that there'd be a big window at Margaret Powell Square, so you could see right through the building. The idea of the deep vista is such a part of the design essential of Milton Keynes. Maybe it won't always be there, perhaps it will survive in the gallery. And look, here is the deep vista. Midsummer Boulevard on June the 21st, 2011, summer solstice, the date with which the road is cosmically aligned. The entrance to Campbell Park. Everyone seems to agree that it needs to have something done to it. Here we imagine overpopulating this axis with the Milton Keynes globe lamp, and also reintroducing other elements of infrastructure, such as the bench. Instead of going for the kind of more famous metal one, we thought about using the one that was designed for parks and villages, and introducing a kind of different accent into the design of the city centre.
Now we go into the play aspect of the whole project. That's right.
I would say the visionary aspect.
Sorry.
Do you
want to lead on that?
That previous image was for a plan, a leisure park in Bletchley that never happened for the brick bits. This is, of course, the plan for the original City Club, the project which we have taken the title of for this idea for expanding, animating the public spaces around the gallery. I'm not entirely sure what's happening with this graphic, because everything seems to be happening. It's a diagram for future leisure, and we've been drawing on the idea that perhaps we could create our own imagery of this kind. And again, in collaboration with 6A architects, we are trying to now develop our own visualization for what the City Club might be.
And this is such a, for us, it's been such a kind of compelling image because it's a drawing, because we just don't know what's really happening in there. And this is for them, I think it was a quite a realistic kind of proposal within their utopian schemes, within the utopian schemes that they had. But it's still there are lists of what goes on, but it's still, what's drawn and what's actually meant to be happening is very unclear. And it's almost, there's something very artistic about it and very playful and quite liberating about this drawing, I think.
But something you all need to know is that this was going to be a citizens' advice bureau, because the Nottingham Development Corporation wanted you to have a wonderful time, even when you were having to get legal aid or some stuff. It was also going to be the community television centre. So here's an early rough drawing for the axonometric that we're working on, and maybe we can just move quite quickly through this sequence. Here's a very quick design for how the imagery of City Club Mark III, which is what we're working on, might correspond to the imagery of City Club Mark I. The models. So I'm just talking a bit about the model making we've been doing.
Well, this is, in terms of our own process, we took the City Club as a kind of, a starting point. And this is, again, we only have pictures of this model. It's been, it was lost or destroyed. We're not really sure what happened to it. But again, it has these very seductive and compelling things going on that you're not really quite sure what's happening. You kind of now see similar things maybe in contemporary parks, like this big box with images on it. You can see an equivalent thing in Chicago, in the Millennium Park there. These projections you also see now quite often in parks. So in a way it's kind of quite visionary, but it's still, maybe still, some of it is still quite utopian as well.
So having spent a lot of time kind of trading ideas around modernism, public space, the social meaning of design, we wanted to make something. So we turned my studio into a model making workshop. After the manner of the Nottingham Development Corporation's model making workshop, only on a fraction of the budget. And we started to make our own models for the site.
So I started, and you'll see this model in the next room, I started making a scale model. So something slightly, not realistic, it's a sketch, but something to get a sense of scale to the area. And we started looking at the gallery as our initial focus. And that, the reason why we did that was because the gallery is being rebuilt, and we thought it was a great opportunity to think about the public realm space around the gallery as an immediate focus. Of course, there's only two of us. We don't have a huge office or team of people working for us. So we've kept it very, very small, and the areas are really just literally the ones that are bounded by the gallery sort of space, if you like, and the theatre. And slowly we've built up, this model slowly kind of got more detail as we came up with different ideas, and we decided, well, that will work there. So for example, moving a sculpture from one place to another, that's already in Milton Keynes, but maybe it's not such a desirable location at the moment. And then looking at the playscape at the back, what will become like a kind of plaza square in front of the gallery, and then also on Midsummer Boulevard, looking at maybe outside the cafe space, which is the design that 6A have built, which you can also see the plans of next door as well.
If you move on to the next view. Yes, I'll go on to the model that I've been making, that I started making, which was a model of the gallery, imagined as a kind of giant playground or a playscape. A lot of my work uses found materials in a very intuitive way to arrive at the language that I want to communicate in my work. Here you can see the extension by 6A at the back. Here is the Q gallery. This is the gallery that we're in at the moment, represented by a toy that I had. So it's to kind of use ideas of play to represent the gallery, but really a way to express first thoughts about what the playscape itself might look like. And finally, we've been working collaboratively with 6A to make a model for the scheme that perhaps draws more directly on the imagery of the original City Club model. And this is what these images show. Here's the kind of the grid of the new extension building, with the sphere in the middle representing the round window of the auditorium that will look out across Campbell Park. And here's some, again, more imagery that's being developed for the playscape as part of the model. Shall I talk about this?
Yes, it's your...
This is my original Milton Keynes New City carrier bag, which has been another source of inspiration. The idea of the chevron and the grid. Not only have we been working a bit with 6A, we've also been working with Sarah Studio, design studio based in London, to develop ideas around signing and visual imagery of the City Club. And this language is a language that kind of underlines what we're about to go through. Maybe we can go quite quickly through some of these images. These are, again, some images from the infrastructure pack. A classic Milton Keynes sign, a piece of play equipment called the Tri-Stack, which has been very influential in our thinking. I remember playing on this kind of frame for the Slate, in the Long Hot Summer 76. It's an amazing structure, black, red and white, that very much looks like the contemporary art of the day. The hand, the arrow and the chevron, three ways of pointing you around the city. Here's an early design scheme by Sarah Studio showing possible signing for the City Club. Perhaps we could add the rubbish bin back to the signpost. Sorry, take them from the lamppost to the signpost. So really, we're just trying to start from quite a kind of, let's call it a sane classical perspective, and get progressively more experimental with it, and see where it might lead.
So here you see almost a direct reference to the Tri-Stack in the signage.
Back to the infrastructure pack. We've been trying to develop a logo for the scheme, because all great schemes have to have a logo. And we've taken this as our starting point for a new City Club logo, which could also act perhaps as a flag or another form of signing for the site. Perhaps this could be the City Club logo for the playscape. Perhaps this could be the logo that represents the activities of the square, or the idea of a night out. One of the early ideas that we had was that we wouldn't try and impose our ego as artists on the space, that we would try and look at a new model of how contemporary art could work in public spaces. And we would do that by treating the infrastructure of the city as if it was already art, as if it was sculpture. So what would happen if the sculpture of the city swapped place with the signposts? This is a very wonderful sculpture by Bernard Schottland, currently on Sherwood Drive in Bletchley. What would happen if that moved to the garden outside the gallery? Perhaps this would happen. Some more images of this piece of work, which I think is a really terrific thing. So imagine if you were coming up the access road along Midsummer Boulevard. This could be the signpost to say you've arrived at the gallery. What will happen to the existing sculpture on the site? The surface of this reminds us of 6A's new building and its stainless steel surface. Perhaps this could move to Marlborough Gate and become a sculpture that is much more visible to all the people that use it, bus users, drivers, and cyclists too. Another porte cochere, this time as a pergola. Landscaping and the idea of planting. We've been looking at the original planting schemes of Milton Keynes from the time. Here's a drawing that I did last night without my glasses on, and I think you can see the impact of that, which looks at the idea of creating a year-round, all-yellow planting scheme for the area outside the theatre columns. Re-greening the front of the theatre seems to us to be a priority, because unlike other parts of central Milton Keynes, it's actually quite a stark place. Here's Coffridge Close in a postcard from the 1970s. Very dense planting. Suppose you had forsythia in the spring. That was a cue for another slide, thank you. Broom in the summer. And marvellous Mahonia as thoughts turn to Christmas shopping in the winter. So the idea is to keep a kind of constant display of yellow. Milton Keynes the central Milton Keynes in the spring is obviously a delightful place because of all the blossom.
Oh, yes or no?
No.
What do we want? Do you want to just go through these images? So I'm a bit confused about why the other side of Midsummer Boulevard looks like this and this side of Midsummer Boulevard doesn't. One of our ideas is that the City Club would plant a new row of blossom trees extending from the theatre down to the food hall. That would be a kind of birthday present to the city on its 50th birthday, a present that would still be growing on the city's 100th anniversary.
So, one of the larger pieces of kind of design that we've been thinking about is this idea of the playground, and we're thinking about again pieces from the infrastructure pack.
No, this isn't in the infrastructure pack, but never mind.
So this is something that Gareth found actually that is now or always has been.
These are the original handcakes from the Waffenden Tower, the Milton Keynes Development Corporation site. And we're looking at the idea of how these could become part of the placemaking. They were designed by the same designer who did a lot of the play equipment in the infrastructure.
We tried to, because they're very dilapidated, they're still there, they're very rusty and old and unlooked after. And we were trying to get one for here for today, but it was difficult to find out who actually owns them or who owns the property.
Yeah, I think the email's still going around.
But the idea would be to bring these, renovate them, or even make new ones, and have them as kind of welcoming hands as you come into the playground.
The use of the hand as a welcoming symbol in the early imagery of Milton Keynes is something that we've looked at. There's a vitrine out there which kind of develops the idea.
So here you have the hands, maybe one pointing in, one pointing out, with using also the lampposts as with different heights, so some extremely tall, some very short, leading you in around the side of the theatre into the playground with one of the high-tech porte cochères that would be outside the learning space at the back of the gallery. There's also, this is in the infrastructure pack. This was actually a piece of play equipment, which was originally a piece of metal, a sculpture of a hand, of this hand, raised above the ground, which you could play on, almost like a bed. And there were two of them with different fingers. One had a finger up and one had a finger down to climb up and down on. So from my experience of designing and working and researching playgrounds, we weren't really sure whether a lot of these things would make it through health and safety processes. So one of the ideas was
we were really certain that 95% of them wouldn't make it.
So
I'm still alive.
One of the ideas was to keep them as ideas, as forms, but to maybe give them a different use. So this is to take that hand and make it into a sandpit, as an example.
All the time we've been having discussions about playgrounds. I've been talking about the idea of the adventure playground, and Nils is an expert on playground, and he'll say to me, no, that's not an adventure playground. It doesn't have any moving parts. So what would happen if we tried to introduce moving parts?
Well, moving parts it's very unusual to have a moving part in a fixed playground. It sounds a simple idea, but it's actually something that you don't get very often. And the idea would be, and this is a picture from a photo from a park in New York, quite a recent new park, and called Imagination Playground. And it's in the financial district in New York. And what they've done is they've brought back this idea of a movable part. And so we're thinking of maybe having this, bringing out from the learning centre, maybe pieces that you could play with in the play area that might be related to buildings or shapes that come from Milton Keynes, particularly some of Gareth's early work, which is related to different shapes that he remembers of Milton Keynes.
The idea of interaction with the art object, or kind of engaging with it physically as well as mentally, is something that interests me, but it always stops at a certain point. The last time I showed this work, people wanted to interact with it so much that it actually got destroyed. But this is an image of it before, when the photographer came in. But this is a modular system that I devised for making cubes, drawing on the original architectural language of the city. And what is this, this modular system can somehow be adapted for the Placemaking as a form that would allow people to play, children to play obviously, but perhaps also generate a kind of awareness about the city. A lot of the ideas that we've been having perhaps connect to ideas about learning and how art can be used as a very important aspect of that. Someone said very succinctly that children learn through play and adults play through art. And a single slogan for the City Club, I would hope that it would be that.
So this is a very, again, suggestive proposal sketch for the playground, and again taking on aspects of the infrastructure pack and our research into Milton Keynes, early Milton Keynes designs. So we brought back, bringing the bollard as a piece of play equipment, the yellow bollard. Again, the lights, so making the lights climbable, so you can actually climb up them to a certain height. Using these low walls, which are very much part of the playgrounds in Milton Keynes, which are actually direct references to the Dutch architect Alain van Eyck, who built a lot of playgrounds for Amsterdam. So they're seating structures, but also play structures. But also they create spaces, they create divisions. And you have the gates, the high-tech porte cochere, and so on, to try and create this very compact but playful space as part of the gallery. And also trying to use the tri-stack. The tri-stack itself would also be considered pretty much a death trap. So we're trying to think how you can remake the tri-stack. We're thinking of using it as a pattern, maybe on some kind of landscape. That's the model of the tri-stack, but in terms of health and safety, it's very easy to fall backwards and hit your head. So it's not particularly, that would not be considered a very safe piece of play.
The idea is to really make it into a kind of labyrinth, and to fuse the idea of this original piece of play equipment with the image of the labyrinth, which is so prevalent in the city. So the design will become a kind of journey in itself.
And using not necessarily prescriptive play elements, not like slides, swings, and roundabouts, but maybe more informal types of play, using just simple earthworks and landforms. And then you have an idea of the lamp where you can actually just climb up it to a certain height.
These are some drawings that I made in the 1980s when I still lived in Milton Keynes, when I was an art student, which used the, I should have said it now for something completely different, by the way, which used the, by Russian constructors, Gustav Klusis. These are propaganda stands, and as City Club in some respects is a form of propaganda, we're looking at how these designs, if you want to just go through the images, could be made into a form of interior signage for the gallery. The idea is that the City Club will not only be about the external spaces of this area of the city, but will run right through the building in various forms. Do you want to go back? Perhaps this book, this display stand by Gustav Klusis, could become a feature of the bookstore that will greet you when you come through the door of the gallery. Moving on, here's a very important interior from the early years of Milton Keynes, the Architects Department of the Milton Keynes Development Corporation, an extraordinary space. What if we turn the cafe into this? And also mixed other elements like the tropical plants building. Again, in collaboration with Sarah de Bond's studio, we've been looking at interior signing and how certain archetypes from the time, from the 70s, such as the estate signing for contractors or the scribble frame, could be fused. The following sequence of images looks at the resulting signpost. Those two designs were possible exterior forms of signing. This would be a design for the interior. Magnetic lettering applied to indoor signing as well. And as I showed you earlier, the Bieber baked bean tin, that level of detail. This is an idea for using the original logo of the Milton Keynes Development Corporation as one of those decals that stops you banging your nose on a window, because the new gallery building is going to need a lot of those.
And then finally, the auditorium upstairs, looking at how to bring in frescoes or other types of decoration, and using very familiar imagery of Milton Keynes as a way of, as a visual sort of sign as well, because you can actually, you'll be able to see it from outside as it's lit up. This big white box is lit very brightly. You'll be able to see it from the street.
So in this idea, Helmut Jackley drawings are projected onto the upper level of the auditorium, and then obviously when the event begins and the lights go down, they disappear. As must be very clear from a lot of what we're saying, the idea of celebrating this tremendous, rich architectural and social heritage history that you have in Milton Keynes is kind of fundamental to many of the ideas that we want to introduce. And it's just important, I think, to end by saying that City Club isn't just a physical space, it's a framework. It's a framework for connecting the gallery to the life of the city, and for involving or for inviting people to participate in the rich field of contemporary art. That's actually our last image.
Thank you. If you have any questions.
Two questions. I'd just like some reassurance that this thing's going to be actually usable, practically usable, because at the moment outdoor space is really difficult to use in Milton Keynes because of wind, because of too much clutter. So to actually produce something, an outdoor show, or to do some theatre outside, or to actually make use of the space. And the other question is, will skateboarders be welcome?
Well, perhaps we'll deal with the first part first. The second part might have something in the gallery might like to comment on that, I don't know. But a lot of these spaces, the outdoor spaces we're considering as realms that invite programming on the part of the gallery. So it's to animate and activate these spaces. What we're doing here is we're throwing out ideas. I hope some of these ideas are really impractical, basically, because a lot of the ideas of the Milton Keynes Development Corporation are really impractical. They were interesting ideas. The challenge for us now is to see how they might be developed, and also to hear views like yours about how they could be developed in terms of creating successful public spaces. In a way, this is the start of the process. The next phase begins here. And those sorts of, we've discussed the idea of Milton Keynes as a windy place, obviously, for example. But how can I put it? We can't move it. So it's a situation we've got to work with. And I think those more practical considerations will become part of our discussion.
Yeah, the next phase would start to look at those practicalities that you're addressing, all through a process of consultation. So it's this is really just a beginning, a kind of a brainstorming way of utopian thinking that maybe some of it can be used, maybe none of it can be used, but it's just a way of starting a conversation. Hopefully we can use a lot of it, but we'll just have to see. There's another question here.
Yeah, I have two questions. When you were first referring to Cedric Price and referring to play space, I wasn't clear whether you were talking literally about play space as in children's play, or metaphorically, this is where people, adults, grown-ups, everybody play. And it became clear you were talking very much about children's play, and I wonder if there's scope for developing the idea of playgrounds for adults as well. If we're trying to place this very important additional resource for Milton Keynes into the hearts and minds of all the population, and something which is a starting way of getting adults to play. And there are a number of examples of installations that that are actually involved in getting adults to behave like children, which I think is spiritually really important. So my first point is to explore whether directly developing a resource for adults to play is something that you can strap into the whole idea. My other point is more about, I understand your brief is very much around animating and setting this important resource, but I'm also very aware that Central Milton Keynes is very long and extended and it doesn't join up well, and part of the signage and the direction of the raising awareness needs to be awareness of the new gallery from Exgate, from the station, from the canal, and there is an opportunity to take a slightly wider view than just this bit of real estate.
Yeah.
I think it's really important if we are to embark upon the scale of aspiration that Anthony touched on with 2023, it needs to take the city centre as a whole. And I also think there's an immediate deficit in your backyard, which is the theatre district, which we would love to have. Even the slightest bit of cultural component within it, which Gareth I was talking to you very briefly about before this. But it's all to do with the nourishing a wider Central Milton Keynes, not just this corner.
Well, I think the programming is a very key part of City Club that will come later. We'll start developing that later. Would hopefully would address adult play, the different projects that can be developed outdoors and inside the gallery and around the immediate area could be part of that idea of adult play, because there is a whole other layer of programming that's part of what we've been considering. It's just something that we haven't, that will come later as part of the sort of program of the whole project. Also, you're describing about signage and wayfinding and so on. I mean, that's also, again, the next phase. That will then, hopefully, as we consult with other groups, with different groups further afield, we will start looking at that more closely and how that will work.
If you can get the wonderful idea of a climbable lamppost past the health and safety,
yeah.
Let's have several of them.
Well, there are, and the reason why we have that is because there are examples of that elsewhere in Europe, and we could use those as examples of, well, they do this in Copenhagen, and it's the same, they're basically the same regulations in terms of play, so why not use them here? There are examples of this.
Question over there?
Thank you. My name is John Binns. I'm Milton Keynes Councillor. I wanted to cover a thank you, a piece of advice, and a thought for you. The thank you is obviously for the kind comments about Milton Keynes Councillors' commitment to the arts. Yes, this is very real. It was expressed, I think, fabulously on that occasion that you referred to. We'd like to do it more often, but it's difficult. It's not something that council officers kind of understand. It's not any numbers or costs. So that leads on to my piece of advice, and that is, based on what I've seen this evening, my advice is, please don't let the council get involved in the details. Okay? And the third point, which is the thing that I hope you will think about, is there is a growing sense that one of the things that distinguishes Milton Keynes is that you can come to Milton Keynes for a predominantly indoor leisure and cultural experience. And so the thought for you to think about is, please either harness it and utilise it to the benefit of whatever you're doing, or decide to confront it and do something that runs at odds with it and create something as a result of that. But please don't ignore it, because I think if you ignore that piece of the distinctiveness of Milton Keynes, lots of the excitement of what I've seen here will kind of just not quite work. So I hope that's a thought for you to do. But thank you for supporting us, Milton Keynes Council. We look forward to continuing to support it.
Thank you. There was some questions
over there. As a resident of Stony Stratford, thank you very much for the glowing references to College Place, which is one of the great undersold modern areas of Milton Keynes, and partly grade 2 stars. No, grade 2, sorry. But comment on the porte cocheres. I like the idea of playing around with the design, but one of the great things that they are is their shelter when it's pouring with rain. And I think the pergola style could be a nightmare. So whether it can have a little see-through bottom, I don't know. When I was walking over here tonight, I thought, thank God for the pergola, for the porte cocheres.
think something we were definitely doing in that was exploring the imagery of Milton Keynes and what would happen if they swapped over. But also just the idea, just some quite practical things. One of the, something we definitely like to do is reinstate the missing portrait share. There should be a portrait share, by the logic of the scheme, the design central should be a portrait share right in front of the theatre columns. But the theatre columns are very dominant architecturally. So maybe a lattice would work better with the open form of the theatre columns. So it's actually to do with some quite practical considerations on one hand, but it's also like a kind of a sketch or a first thought. There are some sort of practical things that need to be.
I think there's a question here.
Just to sort of capture what some of the other members of the audience have said, one of the key things to remember, as I said this in the previous consultation, think big. I know you've only been commissioned to work around the gallery. Try and integrate it into Holden and some of the ideas into Carroll Park. Looking at the design drawings, open spaces, integration is very, very important. Do not forget that, and I know it's possibly something for the gallery, a message for you guys. It's important to make, and it goes back to what John said. It's this total experience coming into Milton Keynes, getting a sense of space, incorporation of art, culture, everything into one place. The second thing is adult play. If you come and chat to me as I've offered before, I'll explain that as a Mahadi drawing for you. Every little component of it has been explained to me. I think it's a great opportunity to actually enlighten, enliven and brighten up the space out there, because it is a little bit dead end. And I'm really glad the gallery is letting you guys on to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to say that something else, or to add something that maybe comes out of that, is that we've certainly also been looking at other plans for what's happening around the Sunbury LRDs, but going right back to things like the EDOR plan for 2001, and just looking at how different people...
Please no.
No, we looked at, I was looking at it at the time, and our response has actually been, well, what happens if you don't do that? What happens if you respect the existing situation? What happens if you work with the grid, not against it? And all our ideas really stem from that, I think, is the idea of how you might create movement around this existing system. Hi.
Correct. How much you were talking about the money side of it, which is always important. How much did you say was short, right? Don't worry, I don't have a check with it, but you were talking about the funding you're trying to raise.
No, that was Anthony.
That's great. What community involved way have you tried to raise that funding from within Milton Keynes, so that people who donate to it, be £3 or £1, they feel an ownership of space? Because the great thing about places like this is that at times it feels brilliant, but people feel it's not theirs. So if there was a concept open for people to feel they could contribute in a way, like people want to break from Milton Keynes City Church, it may actually be a great PR stunt for the space, and also may create a more inclusiveness and ownership of space, which I think is absolutely vital for it to be useful.
Maybe that's
yeah, thank you very much, yeah, that's a really important point. I mentioned funding before, particularly in relation to the expansion of the gallery, rather than this potential project. In terms of the expansion, £700,000 that did I mention that we still have to raise? We are yet to launch our individual campaign. Maybe this is the moment. Thank you very much. We will be launching an individual campaign, and hopefully, at levels that all members of the community might be able to engage with. The City Club itself remains very much just, at this point, just a suggestion. It's just very much an idea.
Is this our last question?
Yeah, I regret having to put a bit of a damper on this. I think what we've got are excellent plans. It really is a great idea, and I think it would do absolutely well. And I both agree and disagree with John, both members of the Milton Keynes Council. A lot of this would have to come through the planning, and therefore it's up to councillors to decide. A lot of it, I think, was. What concerns me is I haven't heard how long you expect this open space to be in use. Because Milton Keynes is coming up to 50 years old, and a lot of it has become tired. You've only got to look around the restrooms there and see what's happened to the walkways. What concerns me is it's an ideal thing that you're planning, but how long do you expect it to last? Are there plans to stop it from getting tired? Are there plans to keep the vitality going? And are there plans to update it? Because people very quickly lose interest in things if they don't see any change in it. And we are in a changing environment. You know, don't get me wrong, I think it's an excellent idea, and it's something I would like to see the last few years. I'd like to see it in 20 years' time, exactly as it is now, but updated to what's going to happen in 20 years' time.
Yeah.
I think there might be two answers to that question. There might be a response from us and there might be a response from Anthony. We perhaps have an ideal around this, which is that we think of this as being like phase one. The original design for Nottingham always talked about phases, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. And phase 4 of City Club might be 2035 to 2049. It could notionally be a project that carries on long after so, you know, I think that's up to really developing a model for how to manage the space. And in the proposal, we throw out an idea for how this could happen. We propose that the gallery should be given responsibility for managing the spaces that surround it, and a kind of gallery-topia, where the interests of art are kind of put at the forefront of public space and our enjoyment of it. That might be my perspective, and Anthony probably has a different one.
No, I think very, very valid points. You're talking about real practicalities. We're not there yet. We're still in the idea phase. Absolutely, it would have to go through the standard planning process with all the engagement activities that would go around that. Gareth said it would be the gallery's responsibility. I did have a I don't think David's here. I did have a conversation with the Parks Trust at some point, and they indicated that they might be willing to take on the lead on that. Who knows? But we're not at that stage yet. We're just still thinking about ideas. I think there are a couple more questions, and then we should probably.
Yeah, I love the self-referentiality and playfulness of your ideas. And I think that's great, taking existing sort of idiomatic elements of the structure of Nottingham and making them bigger or different. That's really nice. And we talk about postmodernism. And, I mean, all new buildings always reflect the age that they're built. When you look at a building, you can usually see when it's built unless you're rebuilding a bombed-out president in a medieval style or something. You inevitably have new materials and new things. And I think perhaps what we should be trying to do here would be something that sets a new tone, like makes a new postmodernism, if you like. You know, something that kind of can put down a marker for other people that this is like, you know, when they built the South Bank, you mentioned the Hayward Gallery, that sculpture of the Hayward Gallery that's looking for a home. You know, when that was built, that set a whole new style of space, didn't it? And I think perhaps there is an opportunity here to do something similar to that. And I would encourage that if I could.
Thank you. Tim, did you want to ask me?
Yeah, I think it works very good. It's really progressed well since the first design, first talking habits. It's really good. One sort of slightly concerned, sort of political thing is that and in the gallery next door, you're very clear about relocating the shop owner from Bletchley, which I can see the artistic reason for it. I think you should be very clear about what you're putting back in Bletchley. Because I think we shouldn't be seeing that we're just pulling all the sculptures around the city into the city centre.
Can I make a point about that? Because obviously it's something we thought about, and you mentioned it to me at the first presentation as well. But part of the idea is that we had a kind of an ecology for City Club, because it wouldn't just be about making new things, it would be about the kind of recycling of elements within the city. Obviously talking about recycling art is a very attractive idea, but the idea also, from my personal experience, of looking at the amount of things that have been lost in Milton Keynes. Every time I come back, something else seems to have disappeared that I think should still be there. It's actually a way of trying to preserve the future of these things as well, but by giving them life, not by putting them in a museum, by giving them a really active use in a new public space outside the gallery that will be seen not just by people from Milton Keynes, but people nationally and internationally as well. So it's actually about raising the visibility of these things as well. It's not about kind of stealing something from one part of the city to put into another. You know, perhaps the next time I go and look at the hand gates at the MKDC building, they'll be gone.
No, because what the gentleman was trying to put across is where all the sculptures are now, they're light where they are, and people get extremely upset if they move. That's what he was trying to put across.
That's a very valid point, and if I can just reiterate, we're just in the realm of thinking about ideas and possibilities. If ever it gets to the next phase, then obviously it's a whole process of engagement and dialogue that would establish whether something is feasible or not. So this is just purely thinking about ideas and
I was looking
possibilities.
at the Fairfax Gallery again, gets moved. That little simple one out there, I love it where it is.
Very good, very good. I'm glad you did. And I think on that note, I thank all of you for joining us this evening. Really pleased you're able to come here, and thank the artists as well. And I just want to say very quickly that we're just about to put an application into the Arts Council, which is partly about engaging with all of these exciting ideas that have been thrown up, and it's really about working in partnership with lots and lots of different organisations and people across the city. And there are quite a few of you here tonight, and this project will hopefully set up all sorts of partnerships and networks. We're talking to about 25 potential partners within the city. Hopefully that process, also about engaging with other organisations and developing all of these partnerships in the lead up towards the European Capital of Culture bid, will be really hugely beneficial, and that this can all become part of the same process. So thank you very much for joining us.